In the beginning, there was Final Fantasy XIV, and it was not good. For most gamers, the story would have ended there, but Square Enix insisted that it couldn't let the franchise's name be so marred by such a disaster. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn is the resulting do-over, and it's a huge success. Beautiful, fun, and only a bit uneven in the late game, this dramatic reinvention easily establishes itself as one of the most sincere and effective apologies in gaming history. It seems counterintuitive to praise a game for reducing its graphical quality, but in this case it was a good move. A Realm Reborn's toned-down approach lets it run smoothly on both mid-range PCs and PlayStation 3 while retaining much of the beauty. The main storyline is full of twists and struggles that give some meaning to the surrounding eye candy, even if, at best, it's a little more than another tale of good struggling to overcome evil. A Realm Reborn makes smart use of cinematics along the way, although Square Enix only took the time to add voices to a handful of them. Most of the time you have to read the story, but it's well written enough that it's not just click-through material. Much of the great strength of A Realm Reborn's class system lies in its versatility. Simply switch out your weapon and you'll become whatever class is associated with the new weapon. All classes also advance into specialized classes called jobs, which requires leveling a dominant class to 30 and a secondary class to 15. Not only does this design add the huge replay value of letting you level every class with the same character, but because you can borrow a handful of abilities from your secondary classes, it results in some really unique feeling character builds. Likewise, you become a crafting or gathering class simply by equipping the appropriate tool, and they level just like a combat class. It's a great idea, and that's why it's such a shame that the actual products of crafting don't outperform the gear from late game dungeons. They're still useful and necessary for enhancements and potions once you hit the raiding scene, but at this moment the payoff doesn't match up to the effort needed to level a crafter. Combat is drenched in MMO tradition, with some flashy animations that almost manage to mask the fact that it relies on the same system of tab targeting and hotkeys that have defined the genre ever since EverQuest. Global cooldowns are here in abundance, and most classes and jobs remain firmly rooted in a single role. A white mage, for example, will always be a healer. Initially, this seems like a disappointment, considering the advances in action combat made by games like Terra, but A Realm Reborn makes up for it by demanding group coordination and lots of movement in dungeons. Indeed, one of the best things about A Realm Reborn is the way it eases you into these later challenges. The early dungeons start out easy enough, but by the mid-30 levels, you'll start seeing dungeons and boss-focused trials that demand full awareness of debuffs and your surroundings. One of the best little touches of combat is that you can call your chocobo into battle with you, where it functions as a tank, healer, or damage dealer depending on how you spend your points. Aside from the main storyline, A Realm Reborn also delivers a wealth of side quests, guild hests that serve as group-based tutorials, guild leaves that function as daily quests of sorts, and even a hunting log for each of the grand companies that players can represent. True, many follow the familiar kill XIV and FedEx template, but Square wisely kept the required body counts involved to a minimum. And then we have Fates. Fates are dynamic events similar to those found in Guild Wars 2 and Warhammer Online before it. In the early levels, they serve as a welcome counterpart to the normal quests you stumble across in the world, and a level matching requirement wisely keeps high-level players from griefing the events. They're a bit too good for leveling though, and by the late 30s, their effectiveness far outstrips any other means of gaining XP. Until Square Enix reduces their effectiveness or increases the rewards for running dungeons, the latter might get a little lonely in the late game. Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn is a great MMORPG experience on both PC and PlayStation 3. Grounded in tradition and learning from the lessons of the games that preceded it, it thrives on the strengths of its excitingly varied and flexible class system and highly mobile combat. The challenge ahead for Square is to achieve the delicate balance of questing, dungeons, and fates for the second half of the leveling process, as well as it has the first. But considering the stunning reversal of fortune that Square has achieved here, it seems like anything is possible. For more on Final Fantasy XIV, you know where to keep it locked, right here on IGN.